Good evening, everyone. And I'm just going to do my opening remarks while you continue to eat your meal. Thank you for welcoming us to Tuktoyaktuk today. We understand there was a death in your community today, and we appreciate you having us here anyway, and we would like to offer our sympathies to the family of the deceased person. We are the Special Committee on Increasing the Representation of the Women in the Legislative Assembly. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Georgina Jacobson-Mazazumi for the delicious stew. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julie Green, and I am the member for Yellowknife Center, which is downtown Yellowknife, and I'm the chair of this special committee. I'm now going to get the other members of the committee to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Michael.
Yeah, this is not to amplify the sound, but it's just for recording purposes. So my name is Michael Natalie. I'm the MLA for Decho. I'm originally from Fort Providence.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. I know, as Julie mentioned, there's a death of an elder in the community, and it's always a hard time to come together. And sometimes when you do things like this, it's a sign of disrespect, but it's good that the community is open to allowing us to be here as early as this morning and letting us know that in fact Mr. Elias passed away this morning. So I'm appreciative to meet with the Hamlet and the Community Corporation today. And sometimes when we travel like this, it's just the way it is in the north. You meet when you can, and that's just sometimes the sun's still shining and the clock doesn't really matter. So thanks for having us here today, and we are here this evening, and I think we're going back tonight after this. But we had a good dialogue with Annie and the Community Corp and the Hamlet. So also Irwin, as you all know, Dorgan is Irwin's uncle, and he couldn't make it here tonight. So continue to work through him here in the community, and we'll keep you updated as events go on. But I'll pass it on to Caroline now.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for inviting us to your community. Again, I offer my condolences to the family. I know it's hard to lose people, and so my thoughts are with those affected by it. I'm the MLA for Range Lake, which is in Yellowknife, and I'm also the Minister of Education, Culture, and Employment, and the Minister for responsible for the status of women. So I'm honored to be in your community, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. We also have some staff with us today. Sitting at the end of the table in the turquoise top is Kathleen Knuch. She's a research analyst for us. And then we have Jennifer Frankie Smith, who's the committee clerk, and Jean Uris, who is doing the Facebook Live. So just a word about that. The meeting is being streamed on Facebook Live, and if you don't want to appear on camera, please speak with Jennifer Frankie Smith. You'll note that we're all using these microphones, and the point of that is to have good sound for the Facebook Live, and so that's why we're using them. They don't make anything louder, as Michael already pointed out. I'm also happy to welcome Catherine, who is going to be providing translation tonight. So I'll call on her now just to summarize what I've said so far. Is that okay, Catherine?
Kainui kuyanai kayapsi, owanga ataga Catherine Kadiakio. In the Wellington Okangnek Toami. Tap God as in Alena took tap God Kang Matakunak took Aknak Legislative Assembly, Aula Yuad NWT, Koyania Vekmi, Pakita Lugu, Koyanaini, Kayapsi, Media Nektugut, Wanga Asin in Wellington, Okangnak, Longa, Koyanaini Nuit, Koyanani Georgina. No lauwsig te goed. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. I'm pleased to tell you that The staff were able to translate the documents into Inuvialuktun, and they are available on the back table. So if you would prefer to have them in that language than English, they are there for you. So the background to our committee is that we were formed last fall to address a persistent problem in the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories, which is that there are only 2 women members out of 19 members. One time there was 3, but in any case, that's not really equal representation for women. And so our committee's mandate was to identify barriers that are preventing women from becoming candidates, because as I will get to later, women aren't very often candidates. To find out what kinds of incentives might mitigate these barriers and encourage women to run, and to recommend changes where appropriate to the current rules of the Legislative Assembly and related legislation. So we, in addition to coming to the communities, we started in Fort Smith in January. We also have asked people to make written submissions, and we've been in touch with Indigenous governments, municipal governments, chambers of commerce, and those kinds of organizations, and asking them if they would participate. So to set the stage for today's discussion, as I mentioned, we have a very low proportion of women and a very low proportion of women candidates. Just 10 candidates of the 60 in the last election were women. And of that group, the 2 of us were elected. A year ago, on International Women's Day, the members of the Legislative Assembly, all of us unanimously passed a motion to establish a goal to increase representation of women to 20% by 2023, which would be 4 members, given the current size of the legislature, and 30% by 2027, which would be 6 members. So the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly tabled a discussion paper on how to increase women's representation by establishing a quota of seats with a mechanism called temporary special measures. And his paper and a summary in Inuvialuktun is available at the back. But temporary special measures are exactly that. They would extend over 2 legislative assemblies, and they would provide a set number of seats for women. So we're looking at that. Our committee tabled its interim report in March. We made 7 policy recommendations, including making the Legislative Assembly a more child-friendly place to work. At the moment, the only place to change a baby in the Legislative Assembly is on the floor, and the only place to breastfeed is in the bathroom. So there are some big improvements we need there. And we also heard lots of interest in the campaign schools for women, and a desire to see more of them in more places so that women have some skill development around becoming candidates. So what we're hoping to hear from you tonight is both about policy changes that would make it more appealing for women to become candidates and ultimately to be elected, and also what your thoughts are on guaranteed seats, whether that's something you feel is a good idea. So as I mentioned, the microphones are for recording purposes. If you want to make a comment, then Jennifer will bring you the microphone, and we'll keep this informal. Just if you have something to say, I'd just ask you to put up your hand, and we'll come to you with a microphone. So with that, is there any brave soul who would like to start? Okay, so I usually, if nobody is brave. Oh, right there. Good.
I mean, I'm not speaking from a place of great knowledge, but as a man, I think that guaranteed seats.
Say your name, please.
Sure, David Stewart from Inuvik. Guaranteed seats might sound like a shocking thing to some people, but I think that, I mean, at least 1/3. Come on, what could be what could go wrong? I mean, anyway, I just believe that that's something that definitely could help. I also have a question for the education minister. I don't know a lot about what they teach in the high schools in the Northwest Territories, but how much time is dedicated to teaching our system of governance and opportunities that there are for both men and women to serve a role.
Thank you. Thank you first for identifying that guaranteed seats from a man's perspective is something we should consider. That's honorable. As the education minister, I'll answer your question. So we have what's called Northern Studies in grade 10, and we're actually just in the process of redoing our curriculum to actually have more of a focus on our consensus government and how the roles and responsibilities within our political system run here. So it's something that we're addressing now. When we were looking as a committee, we thought, do we actually do more for young women within that? But I think that it's more about, there's a couple of issues. One, it's about all youth need to see politics as a viable option. And the other is that because we have 10 educational bodies, it's really, we give a general curriculum, but it's everyone has their say over where it goes. So it's really hard to have one specific curriculum for everyone going across. So it's something we need to look at, though.
Catherine, do you want to do this so that you now make a summary of what was said, or do you want to wait and be called on by an elder? His question was how much time is spent in the school teaching about consensus government and about politics. And the answer the minister gave is that it is included in the curriculum, but each school board or district educational authority has the say over what they teach, so it's not consistent. Yeah. So just so that I'm giving you an opportunity to use the language, I don't want to make you translate things that you don't want to, but I'm just trying to make it available to people who might be listening. Yeah.
Sunalo daima tamna apiksayok sunada ilasak veanang nun kanok tap kuad no takat ilasak nyak tuat kanasak daima apiksayok.
Any other questions or comments? Yes. Just say your name at the beginning so the people watching on Facebook know who you are.
Okay. My name is Annie Steen, and I am the vice chair of the Tuck Community Corporation. I'm proud to say that our community corporation is 50% representation with women. It actually would have been more, but one had to leave. As well, in our Hamlet Council, 3 out of the 6 are females. So local, municipal, and local governments, women are starting to put their names in and running and winning by landslides too. I can tell you that. In our community, highest votes go to women when we decide to run. I'm wondering if your study will look at all the communities and the local governments, try to find out, are there other women in the local community that are sitting on municipal boards or on local Indigenous government boards? As well, I know that a lot of the women run for DEA because education is important to children. So it's circled around children and family. Obviously, it ties nicely. My observation, I think, is municipal governments are roads and water and garbage, and so that's a man's job, you know. That's changed. That's why people, you know, I think that men are in there because it's interest to them. So you know, what could women do? Like education is very, if you look at the education boards, I think you're going to see a lot of women representation. But I think that first and foremost, if women are going to represent, we need educated people, a huge, because I think women like to be confident in what they're doing and not just take something blind. You need to be adept in all kinds of, you got to read, you got to read what's going on in the world, not just in your local community, but to really become worldly so that you can gain confidence to speak up in any venue, any meeting. I myself, I read a lot, so you have to pay attention to what's going on in your economy, your local backyard, as well as Canada and the Northwest Territories. I read your Hansards, so I pay attention. Those are, I think maybe if we took the Hansards and showed them to kids in schools and say, hey, look, this is what the government's talking about today, you might get kids, youth interested in that, to spark that at least awareness. For now, I mean, I don't want to take up everybody's time. So
Okay, well, let me just
got lots.
respond to a few of the things you've said. Starting with the last thing, the Legislative Assembly hosts a youth parliament every year for students in grade 9 and 10. And it's a week-long event in Yellowknife where the person who comes from the community becomes that MLA, and they do the things that MLAs do. They write a statement and they give a statement, and they are in the house, the actual house, with a speaker and so on. And so the deadline to apply is tomorrow, but I'm sure that if it came in on Monday, they wouldn't say no. So if you know any students in grade 9 or 10, this is a great opportunity for them to learn about consensus government and about politics. We are not studying women who are active in other levels of government. We know from the information that MACA collects on community governments that there are way more women at that level than there are at the territorial government level. And I know you said you were a big reader, so you're no doubt aware that in the last round of municipal elections in the tax-based communities, 5 women became mayors of those communities. So that's unprecedented. There's never been as many women mayors as there are now. So what we see in Yellowknife, where I live, is that often people will go from municipal government to territorial government. They'll sort of get a taste of how they can exercise their influence and what their passion is, and then move into a different form of government. Do you think that that's a realistic expectation here, that that all these women who are involved in the Hamlet Council and the Community Corporation might be interested at some point in going to Yellowknife?
I think women are interested in local issues, what's happening to their families and to their in the community. So they would not be able to pay closer attention to local stuff if they're away in the territory. So I think that if a woman does decide to go, it's age is a big factor. If you've got young family that needs to be taken care of, they won't leave. But I know that a lot of us that sit on the boards now, we're concerned about the community, and when you go to the territory level, you got to worry about every community, not just your own, and then that could take away. And local politics, you hear lots of complaining, and then you're going to hear complaining all over the Northwest Territories, and it takes the spark out of trying to make a difference in some instances. So, yeah.
One of the barriers that women might have here in the community is that is money. And if you're sitting, and if you want to be an MLA, you have to go and visit in all of the little communities that we have here, Sax Harbor, Holman Island, Pawlatuck, and money is like just to do the campaign itself, because people I know will vote for somebody that is knocked on your door and said, "Hi, my name is so and so. I want to represent you." Those barriers that a lot of the women have here are also children, husbands, fathers, because not only do the women that do work from 9 to 5, their job is not done at the office, you know. They have to go home and cook and clean and get ready for the next day. And then they're up at the crack of dawn just to do the same thing. The thing that I'd like to say about what we do with our men here in the community is that we tend to dress them up, shove them out the door, and tell them to go talk for us. These are the things that we want to hear you put on the plate of the listener, wherever they may be, Hamlet, MLA, or whatever. It's the women. You take a look at every association here in the community. Every association, you walk in the door, you see women. They're doing all of the footwork for the men. And they're all sitting there all dressed up in the finery that the woman sewed for them. You know? Like we do everything. But everything here is a barrier. If we get up and stand up and talk about our feelings or the things that we want or whatever, we're told we're bullies. I was told I was a bully for explaining to the community exactly what was going on at one meeting, and they got angry with me. The man called me a bully just because I had a voice to say whatever I had to say. But these things, you know, like if you're knowledgeable in anything and you and that's what you need to, you know, to be a politician, you have to have some knowledge of how our governments are run, and we've got to make them family friendly, violence free. We have to have gender equality. We have to have all of those things that will make a well-rounded politician of a woman. Mind you, they all got that anyway, but you know, we haven't gotten to the polls yet. We haven't been placed into the situation where, you know, you're voted in. A lot of women would run, but a lot of them are scared of women who express themselves and are, you know, plain talk. You know, not only money. It's not only money is a barrier, families are a barrier, because, you know, the hours that I know the MLAs do when they sit together or even come in here for for a committee, I know that you guys do hours of work. You know, you read all of the stuff that you have to, and then you have to find a way to please a lot of us. And those are the things that, you know, can be instilled starting right from the beginning, right from the school. You know, this is the territorial government and this is the way it is run. This is, you know, we're divided into many of these sections. I mean, our kids have to start learning at kindergarten. They're well enough and, you know, and they can learn. And as they carry on, you know, we have to find a way to get the, you know, to tell them that every one of you have the potential to be prime minister or premier or whatever their dreams are, you know, as a politician or, you know, a speaker for the people. But you got to get their you got to know what the people want in the first place, you know. You got to know what they're up against and what their challenges are, and to be able to listen to what they, you know, they care most about. You know, basically it's family, money, and if we don't have equality, women don't have equality in all of those areas, You know, we're pretty poor citizens of the Northwest Territories. But to make us even finer and better, we've got to train our young ladies to how to deport themselves in public, and how to speak and not be afraid to be put down or told to shut up and yell that you're just a bully, or, you know, stuff like that. They got to be able to overcome situations like that. And, you know, they gotta, and they have to have the patience of a saint, you know, for one thing, and they have to have good listening skills. And just to be able to do what we were raised up in our culture to do in the first place was just to be kind to others, you know. Do unto others as he would do unto yourself, or whatever that saying is. But to raise good, young, healthy leaders, you gotta deport yourself in such a way, you know, in your policies, in your legislation, in your whatever you're creating. You know, and you got to be able to tell your children it's okay to talk, and it's okay to be curious, because, you know, that's what you're going to bring to the table when you sit down and speak to others. I don't know where I went with this.
Georgina, I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the years that you spent as chair of the status of women. Money is an issue we hear about quite often. And so how do you think that can be resolved? So I'll give you an example. If women knew that they would get a rebate on their campaign expenses if they earned a certain percentage of the vote, do you think that would be an incentive for women to run?
If they got a rebate, like, let's talk before they even get a rebate on money they're putting out there. How about the money that they're bringing in the first place? You know, there's people who are ready to be politicians and are on income, elders' income. You got no money, extra money at the end of the month to use to run as a politician. You got to have a sponsor. You got to look for your sponsors. You got to be able to, you know, like campaign school would be great for that. You know, how to raise money for yourself to become a politician. But in this region, holy smokes! I mean, and if the mother's got children, you know, you can't use the baby's family allowance to go and visit Sax Harbor or Hawktook. What you gonna, you know, what kind of Pampers you gonna buy for your baby when you go back home and there's, you know, nothing for you to, there's no extra dollars, absolutely no extra money. And this is where we think that the government can step in, possibly, you know, is to help the politicians go, especially in this area. You know, and sometimes weather is not your friend, and you could be stuck in a place for a long time, you know, and all of these unexpected trials and tribulations of, you know, your trails. I mean, there's some people who have it easy. The ones from Yellowknife, you guys just, you know, you got your riding right in the city, you know, you can walk, but here you got to fly everywhere. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true, Georgina. You know, I can walk across my riding in 20 minutes. So I am in a very different position than somebody like Herb or Michael, who have multiple communities in their ridings.
And I think
So what you're saying is a rebate is all well and good, but what you really need is the money up front.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think of the idea of a quota of seats for women?
Of what?
A quota of seats for women.
That there would be wonderful. That will be just great. I mean, you know, what about you know, having for every region you also have a woman, you know, from from each and every riding, you know, or bring them in as an advisory group or whatever. But it will be wonderful to see that place, you know, filled up with women.
Thank you very much.
Solutions will be done faster.
Yeah. Well,
Queen
one of the
Annie
things-
Georgina. Winga Bill. Sunada Agnite Takusuk Bill. Legislative Assembly Mun. Kanusik Time Agnite. Sangi Yumik. Sabak Vianagnut. Ja, Kanusik Time Takusuk Bill. How they want to see more women in the assembly or legislative, or make it stronger for all women.
My name is Julia Cockney.
Yes, can you explain how it works?
It's on, but it doesn't amplify, it just records it.
Okay. My name is Julia Cockney. I phoned in before and I asked what was going on at Kitti Hall because we just live across the street and there were so many cars here. They said there was a supper in the Legislative Assembly. Right away we started coming across. I wasn't aware that there was going to be this meeting here, but I'm glad you're all here, especially you, Herbert. I haven't seen you around for a while, so it's good to see you down here. I don't know the rest of you, but women are very powerful ladies. Women are really powerful women. They've raised kids and they see and do what they could to make sure that their families are okay. So from what I've seen of some ladies in powerful positions, they've made a difference within our community and within the North. They're like Georgina, they have to be verbal and they have to stick to their guns and in what they believe. Women from the North are very strong ladies because they had to live a really hard life before now. And it would be really good. Like, sometimes I feel like the Legislative Assembly is way far away. You know, we have problems here within our community, and yet when we try to get it fixed, there's always blockage at some level, even before we reach Herbert. Like, I don't know, it's hard to get to the to get your problem solved. Tuck has a lot of problems. Alcohol and drugs, abuse, not enough staff workers that come here like counselors, or that's what I see here in Tuck. I've been sober for I can't remember how long. I'm supposed to go to the medicals. I'm supposed to travel on Monday for medical. And I had to go to the health center to sign a paper saying that I won't drink at Vital Label. I mean, it's, gee, I haven't drank for how many years and I have to sign a paper like that. To me, I feel like it's so degrading. The rules that they make down there, I know they're made for a purpose, But when somebody tell me I can't drink anywhere because I don't drink now, it's degrading to be told that, and the health center know it. But of course, I never said nothing. I think we need more women in legislative assembly to make a difference in the north at that lower level. People with a voice, ideas. Daima, good enough.
Goeienaini, Julia. Yep. Night. We really need Nipiput is among Nick, Sangiyuk Lugu, Kausi, Inuit, Atauskmun, Kadiktoat, Nakuyukun. So I'm just saying, like, women are very strong. They need a voice, yeah, to keep help the community and the people in our TAC and ISR. Like she said, we really need strong voice, whether it's speech, education. Yep.
Thank you, Catherine. Noella, do you want to make a comment? Just introduce yourself so we know who you are for the Facebook stream.
My name is Noella Cockney. I'm the Hammock councillor here in town, and just wondering and thinking as everybody is speaking in regards to the lack of women in leadership and everything, and honestly, as I was growing up, I've had many role models over the years. My mom, Lucy Cockney, is one big one for me. Nellie Cornier is another one. Agnes Simler is another one. There's many of them out there. There's Georgina. There's Julia there as well. A part of many meetings, councillors, TCC and everything. I think that we should have to try and actually get it into the community first. Like the community leaders right now, we should actually try and get into the school systems and try and talk to all the kids and everything like this, and advise them how important this situation is, and to see not only the women but also other the males as well. But as we're speaking now, it's mostly as a woman that we need to see in there. And it would be good. I know we've been trying in Hamlet to get a youth representative ever since the election, and unfortunately we haven't been able to get one. And I'm hoping in the next little while or so that we will be able to get a youth representative in the Hamlet Council. And this way that we can, they can bring back all the matters that they've heard in the meetings back into the school systems, or any of the kids have any questions. As they're going, I mean, it's, I've had so many things going into my mind and everything like this, and now, you know, it's all jumbled up. Now that I have a mic, it's hard to get things straight, but I'm trying to do my best to actually do that. And even after us going into the school system and everything like that, and then you ladies in the actual chambers there that can actually probably, maybe if you're doing the tours of the communities and that, go into the schools and talk to the individuals there as well, into the high schools and all this other stuff. It'd be really beneficial for the youth that we have here. Like I said, everything that I had in mind, my mind was all right there now. Unfortunately, I just can't get everything sort of straight. And that was my main point, really, is trying to educate our youth right now in regards to how important it is, as they will be the ones that are going to be running our communities and our territories. So that's one of the big things I thought.
Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for being on the community council. I'm sure that that's not always a happy and thankful task. I think the idea of politicians like Caroline and myself going into the schools is really a good idea. I really am a firm believer in the expression, if you can see it, you can be it. And so as long as students aren't seeing women in leadership, which they're not very much in the Legislative Assembly, then they're not going to think about that for themselves. But because there's such great representation now at the community level, they obviously think about that. So the question is then, how do we get them to think about going to the Legislative Assembly? And there are some things, like Georgina raised the money, that we can make recommendations about, but whether it's the right time in your life with respect to your caregiving roles and so on, those are things that everyone has to decide. Caroline and I are the same age, and both of us made a choice to wait until our children were grown up. And that is very common, although increasingly I find more young women are interested, especially when they understand that they'll be welcomed, that their children will be welcomed, that their needs will be accommodated. I think it makes it more appealing. But still, at the end of the day, it's easier if you're not in Tuk, or let alone if you're in Ulahaktuk, you know, to try and do that work. It's such a big travel commitment, for sure. Hang on, Georgina, she's bringing you the mic.
The other thing I'd like to see is women being recognized for their work in their communities. And if that is brought up, you know, like at least once a year, twice a year, then, you know, people would, like you said, if they see you get an award for something that they can do, you know, eventually, you know, they'll get into politics, or they'll get into whatever the award is going to be for. But I think it's time that each and every community be given that chance to recognize the women of strength and their female politicians, and never mind that. You know, how about the hardworking staff of women that are in the communities, in the hamlet offices, and the Tuk Community Corps, and the other committees, you know, because one of the things that I think a good politician will try and understand is, you know, if you go sit in the housing committee, if you go sit in the DEA, if you go sit on the Amayunga Children's Shelter, if you, and as a committee member, if you go and sit in all of these small committees, and to learn what their challenges are and how you can bring that to the forefront as a politician, if that's where you got your mindset, you know, eventually, I think that would be a better place for better place to live in. You gotta have recognition of the women that are putting their hard work out there.
Thank you.
Nani, Georgina.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, would you like to talk? I'm looking at you, Mrs. in the white sweater.
Kinalutaima.
Would you like to talk?
I guess so.
Okay. Tell us your name when you start.
Hello, welcome. My name is Clara Bates. I'm from here. My dad wanted me to be born here, so he got a midwife named Elin Dick to make me be born here. So right at the beginning, I just like the idea of a midwife, and I'm glad you guys decided to come here. It inspired me. I wanted to bring all my granddaughters, and I could not. I just brought my oldest granddaughter. That was it. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Kinalutay ba? Oh.
I just, again, it's Annie Steen. You had said that you want to select seats or so many designated seats for the women in the legislature. Now, my question is, what community or what riding would you choose? You know, like that's kind of, there might be a very well candidate for, say, Nunavut riding that a man is much better than a woman, you know, that could fit the role better. Like, how would you determine which riding you'd choose to women to be selected for?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and thank you for that. So the paper that the speaker put out is based on a model that was used in the South Pacific in a country called Samoa. It is an indigenous country with a patriarchal society, and women were not given the right to vote there until 1991. And so there was a point at which they decided they were going to welcome women, into their legislative assembly. And they established and agreed, after having a referendum and changing the law, that there would be 5 seats set aside for women. And the way they allocated those seats was they would have a normal election where all the candidates put their names in and the one with the most votes wins. And they would see at the end of that how many women they had. And if it was less than 5, they would appoint the balance from how well those women finished in the popular vote. So the specific example is if we had 5 seats allocated to women in the 2015 election, 2 of us were elected. So 3 would have been appointed, and the 3 would have been Najitzel Norbert, who was in Yellowknife, Jane Groenewegen from Hay River, and Yvonne Doolittle, who was running from the Satu. So there was almost like a natural distribution of how that happened. So it was based on the proportion of the popular vote. That's how those seats were allocated. So the idea of the temporary seats is that the seat would last for the term of the Legislative Assembly, the 4 years, and at the end of it, the whole assembly would be dissolved and the whole process would start over again. But the idea or the benefit is that women would be there in numbers right from the beginning. And so it would jumpstart women's representation rather than working on it slowly, which is the approach we've been taking up to this point. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, obviously, I think it's a good idea now that I understand how you would do it. I think that it should be even further in the ministerial portfolios, so the 5 women should automatically get ministerial portfolios, you know, because I think that just that would be the carrot, actually, you know. If I'm running and I might not win my riding, but I did well, then my carrot would be, okay, I'll run, and you never know, I might get a ministerial spot, you know. That might be a good carrot to consider.
That's an excellent point. So last time the 2 of us were elected, and Carolyn will tell you the story of what happened with respect to the cabinet appointment.
Yeah. So the last time when Julie and I were elected as MLAs, I think we were both approached by male MLAs who asked us to consider running because what I heard is they want a woman in cabinet. A woman in cabinet. So, yeah. So then Julie came to me and said to me, you know, who should we consider? And at that time, I had lost a child. So I know a lot of my male colleagues were trying to say, don't you run because you've lost a child. You're going to grieve. And but I'm stubborn. I'm bullheaded. I've fought for everything all my life. I've been a fighter, like you say, a survivor. So I wasn't willing to give it up for that. I was more determined that I needed to be there at the table. And Julie said, so which one of us should run? And I turned to her and I said, which one of the men? How many of those men asked which one of those men are going to run? Why are they asking the only two women? Why are we having to pick which one of us would run? And all those other men never got that question. So we both ran. Yeah. Next time we'll both get in.
You've been warned.
If you have those, 3 extra seats and only 2 get in, and the runner-ups from whatever riding, it would be so interesting to see all of them be ministers, and you would have a very strong, if you're serious about this, then you have to put it all on there. That's the only way it could possibly work if you want women representation, I think, is you don't make, sure we'll encourage everybody, all great, but let's get serious. If you want real representation and real women at making the decisions, then I think you need 5 female cabinet ministers or 1 premier and 4 cabinet ministers.
I hear you.
That's good. Thanks, Annie. I was thinking about that, and actually maybe 2 years ago, while we're sitting down in session, I was like, why doesn't everybody get a portfolio? That way, government can work the way it's supposed to work. Sometimes I wait I think the longest time I've waited was 23 days before I even got one response back from a department, and that was a long time. Some days it's same day, but some things are easier to solve than others, and that's the frustrating part. And so much goes on during that time. You kind of like, that's so long ago, but you just keep trying to work on it, and no matter what, you're pushing the department to work towards it. And my fear always is I'm forcing them to make a decision, but I'm forcing them to make a decision. What if they do less because they're doing it today rather than better next week? I always think about maybe we need to share more portfolios around members. And if we're going to have a male and a female from each riding, maybe there's, if the government's spending money for us to travel around, why, that's almost is equivalent to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 salaries with the amount of money the legislators spending on their last year with bills to put regular other MLAs in the legislature. So we need to think about that, because that's money just, some people say, just going up in thin air. Well, are we getting anything done? I don't know. That's up to people to decide, right? And I think we need to really look at how the structure is, because we're not party politics, and that's the last thing we want to do. Otherwise, our small communities would be outnumbered all the time and outvoted. So we need it needs to be in all fairness, and as well look at Tuck. Tuck has the first female senator, in the Northwest Territories, and that's pretty cool, actually. And women support in so many other ways. Without women, I don't know where this place would be, really, or any place in this world. It would be a mess, right from you name it. It's endless, there's nothing I can't think of that doesn't have a touch of a woman that makes it better than what it already is. And I think we need to focus on that more. We had a conversation yesterday, about being a token person being put in just because, and how would that make the person feel? Where's the dignity in that? Funding is a huge issue. I know, and especially in our riding, travel is not cheap. My budget, I was done in January of this year, so I couldn't travel up north anymore. And I was like, wow, what can you do, right? And that's what we're bound by sometimes, and it's sorry. Anyways, yeah. You can put headphones on if you want. But I agree with you. We need to look at how the structure is and maybe change it to something that we call our own in the north to make it better for women and more friendly in every way possible. as I mentioned yesterday, having women develop policies, like look at Tech is very proactive in their business development more than anyone else in the territory with the amount of money and the amount of personnel that you have. And it's a fact, you know, when you come here, it's like, yeah, you see from the briefing that we get today, every time we come here and get a briefing, you're busy and you're doing things, and you're not just cherishing that one, but you're going on to the next one and doing more. I think we need to use that as an example for government and how programs work in the territory and how effective you could be with with the resources you have. And it's all mostly women that are surrounded by it. We're sitting in the hamlet today. It's the same thing. Every aspect of it. How do we make that more for across the territory and across the country and that for our regions? You know, look at IRC. IFA 101 is going into the schools. You know, using that as part of the curriculum. You know, we're doing that in self-government, and we need to push the government to do that more across the territory with all the Indigenous groups. And I think that when you have awareness like that, that's when it's going to get, you know, better and more stronger and more encouraging for women to run in, where politics could be sometimes a very dirty place to work in. And it's some days it's like, oh, what am I doing? But at the end of the day, you never forget, you know, why you're there, and that's why you keep pushing. And women are the ones that remind you all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. Is there anyone else who would like to make any remarks about how to increase the representation of women? Okay, here.
I didn't quite complete my thought earlier. I think that when you, what do you call this program? Was it proportional representation, or was it?
Temporary special measures.
Yeah, temporary special measures.
Yeah.
When you market it, I mean, there's going to be tons of men that are going to say, oh, this is discrimination. We can't have this in this day and age. But we're talking about hundreds of years of active discrimination against women. And this is a means of just trying to create some balance. So I would suggest that that would be used in the marketing campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up today. And yesterday I was just remarking to my colleagues that I'm more likely a better listener than speaker. But I just wanted to take the opportunity just to thank everyone that showed up. And I did an interview in my language today. I speak Decho Denejati. I'm from Fort Providence, so I did an interview with Peter Hope today. And what I talk about was just the role of this committee and what we're doing, and that more likely what we're experiencing at this point in the time of the NWT is change. And the way that I'm kind of approaching this committee is, I mean, how can we make change, but also at the same time, how can, you know, we come up with quality decision that's reflective of not only male people but women. You know, as an example, just recently, we had a lot of debate on family violence, and you know, and a lot of people shy away from that, especially men. But in the other spectrum, you know, we have a lot of followers that believe in the idea of natural resource development, because that's what we need. We need an invigoration of development for the economy to create jobs and businesses. So that's the mindset of the GNWT Legislative Assembly. And it's perhaps in some regard very male-dominated thinking. And so, you know, maybe this is the time where we need to be very inclusive of how we look at the consensus system in a very ideal way. How can we be more inclusive of women, but people that are marginalized on the outer periphery of society too? Being a minority in small communities, it could be. So in that regard, I think this is timely that, you know, we create an undertaking that could make some very significant changes for the evolution of the North, and I think we're at that point. So I'm very proud to be associated with this committee, and I really believe that you know, things will happen this election, and we might see some very exciting changes. And I just wanted to highlight, like, you know, one of the concepts that's been promoted is the idea of guaranteed seats, and I appreciate, you know, trying to create discussion in the interest of ensuring that women do in fact are have a greater representation in the legislative assembly. But like women, indigenous people have been marginalized for a long time, and and guaranteeing seats in the North is it's a concept that's been long desired by First Nations people, and so are we, if we're going to embrace the idea of guaranteed seats, are we opening up the idea of constitutional discussion in terms of ensuring, like my region, the Dutcho, doesn't have a land claim. We still believe on the fundamental ideas of treaty rights and obligations that the government entered into. But then we have other regions that have land claim areas. So there's a different association with the federal government of Canada. So how do you recognize these special rights in this modern context at this point? So, it's, in some regard, there's been, some successes. Of course, the most significant one was, the idea of recognizing Indigenous people through constitutional, when the Constitution was repatriated in Canada in 1982. And that was Section 35, where Indigenous people are recognized in the Constitution within Canada. So there's that mechanism. It could guarantee representation for women, but it's got to be, we got to remind ourselves it's a path that First Nations have long aspired to. And at some point maybe the balance of the NWT could change, and we ourselves as Indigenous people might want to say, well, we want to be guaranteed in the Legislative Assembly if perhaps we go down the path of party politics and we lose the influence in terms of how the GWT is run. Then I think we need to give some serious consideration to guaranteed seats. And I've heard women say that perhaps, it shouldn't be because of special rights, but it should be perhaps founded on the idea of special merit. That, I, like woman, in my language, I describe what I heard from some very strong women that are very powerful, and they have multiple roles. They're women, of course, and they're mothers, they're grandmothers, and then they're sisters. And then on top of that, they're caretakers of their household, wives, but they're also very involved in the community, and they're providing that very primary role in the community and developing the community and advancing the community agenda. So, there's a lot of good things that are happening out there. Perhaps we don't acknowledge, and so I think there's some good stuff that we could build upon, and I just wanted to highlight that. And as I said, like if I could maybe highlight the idea of, well, how do we have better representation for women in the NWT? But for me, what's most important is, well, how can we improve the quality decision of the GWT? Is sometimes I said, like, on the social issues, perhaps we're kind of weak. Is it because women are not properly represented in the GWT? Sometimes we have a stronger bias towards natural resource development. Is it because our cabinet is, not to disrespect my colleagues that are on cabinet, but is it because there's a male-dominated mindset of cabinet? So this is a very good discussion, even though perhaps it's creating some light and perhaps in some dark areas that perhaps need to be discussed, and this is providing that opportunity. And so in a lot of ways, I think there are paths that we're kind of creating and for young women to go down that possibility of becoming leaders, and we could perhaps see that change this fall. But for the most part, this is my first time to Tuktoyaktuk, but I'm very appreciative of the people that we've heard, their opinions, and and I think this is something that I wanted to be involved with. We did an interim report in our recent session. We are going to more likely complete a final report too, and to have some recommendations. We did provide some recommendations to the House. One prominent one was making child care as an allowable expense, and we've did that, and so it was accepted by our colleagues in the House, and of course it's going to be implemented. So we are actually making some strides, I think, but we got to remind ourselves too that there's some very traditional beliefs out there too that we're still kind of coming from a very perhaps patriarchal society, but then in some ways, because of the colonization and the whole history of how the Americas was settled, our values have been perhaps contradicted, and we're now seeing those things in place, and it's almost like we have to decolonize our mindset to almost allow women to become more prominent in the circles of leadership.
Thank you very much, Michael, for those thoughtful remarks. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to talk? As Michael said, we're going to do a final report. We hope to table it at the beginning of June, and it will focus on the things that we heard here and what we heard in Inuvik. And then at the beginning of May, we're going to Betchco and to Norman Wells. So we have a couple more places to go. And our final report will really wrestle with this question of guaranteed seats for women and whether that's something that we want to move into a referendum for people to vote on. So that's sort of the next step. Now, if you have thought of things that you would like to say, but you don't want to say them publicly, you can send us an email anytime prior to 5 p.m. on May the 8th. And Jennifer Frankie Smith here is our trilingual committee clerk, and she can provide you with her email address, or you could also find it on the handouts. I would also like to thank everyone who came and joined us for supper and for this discussion. And we will certainly take your views into consideration when we write our final report, so that we reflect accurately what direction people want to go. So if there's nothing further, I'm going to suggest that we adjourn, and we'll be here for another 15-20 minutes. So if there's something you'd like to say to any of us directly, please take that opportunity. So with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, she wants to say something now? She wants to say something now.
Oh, okay. I was
turned
too
off now.
hasty.
Oh, it's back on again? Okay.
Herb who?
What is that?
Herb who?
Herb who? Oh, Herb's right there. I know, yeah, but it's a joke. It's a joke in, okay. Okay, thanks everyone. Is that you ringing?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that.
My
That cost me
phone
a
was
pie.
ringing into my hearing aids, and I pulled my hearing aids out.